The deal is not looking good. We're not going to sit on our hands again and allow these jihadists to rebuild. So not only is the IDF not withdrawing from southern Lebanon, Israel is saying it's going to continue to take action in Lebanon. Prime Minister Netanyahu is going to be facing a huge test, turning around to this president and potentially any future ones and saying no. Welcome to this MirYam Institute briefing. I'm Yaakov Lappin, the in-house analyst at the MirYam Institute, and I wanted to take some time to talk to you about the latest developments. They've been very dramatic. I'm sure you've all seen the headlines, starting with this reaching of an agreement, so-called agreement, a memorandum of understanding is what they're calling it, between Iran and the United States. And there's been a digital signing a few days ago. There's going to be a formal signing ceremony on Friday in Switzerland. And this development has raised many questions, many concerns. What does it mean for the Iranian threat? What does it mean for Israel? What does it mean for the region? What does it mean for American security? All huge questions. I'm going to try and tackle some of these questions. And also, we will be talking about what Israel could do in response to these developments. So let me start with what's known. And when it comes to the MOU, let's start by saying not much is known. We've had many contradictory reports, some coming out of the Iranian state media, which is far too often treated as fact, some coming out of American media, contradictory claims about the various clauses of this MOU. So first of all, I think we have to step back and understand that we don't yet have the full picture. But there are a few things I think that we can say for sure regarding this memorandum of understanding. First of all, what it's done is it's divided some of the biggest issues at play here. It's divided them up and basically front-loaded and delayed the negotiations over Iran's nuclear program. So now there's going to be 60 days for the United States and Iran and the mediators to negotiate the Iranian nuclear program. That's been delayed. But in exchange for that delay, there's going to be an opening of the Hormuz Strait. And there's going to, reportedly, even Iran will be allowed to use the Hormuz Strait to export its oil and energy. This hasn't been confirmed. This is one of the claims. And the Gulf Arab countries will be able to send out their oil through the Hormuz Strait. And so there's been this division between the Hormuz Strait and the Iranian nuclear negotiations file. Now, that's not a coincidence because the Hormuz Strait was actually a pressure lever that was acting on everybody. It was certainly suffocating the Iranians themselves by having it closed. They were losing about $450 million every single day. And according to some estimates, the oil and energy budget, the exports that Iran sends out to the world, that accounts for something like 50% of the IRGC's budget, their military budget, their terror proxy budget. So this is a major suffocation hold, a chokehold that was placed around the Iranian economy, around the Iranian regime. It's got hyperinflation, the currency's through the roof. They've absorbed hundreds of billions of dollars of damage, war damage to their infrastructure. So this regime is very weak on the inside because of this blockade and the war that preceded it, and because of the economic mismanagement and the sanctions. So when you put it all together, actually, the lifting of the blockade, I think, is a negative development for all of us who want to see the Iranian regime destabilized and further harmed. So that's the reason that the Hormuz Strait has been separated from the negotiations. It's basically an attempt by Iran and the United States to take this pressure lever off the table, because it looks like President Trump was also influenced by the oil market, by the high costs of oil that was generated through this closure. And therefore, I think that, this played a key role in his decision to basically head towards some sort of diplomatic arrangement, an MOU, however hazy it may be, in order to try and take that pressure off. I think he's also guided by American domestic political considerations. And so at the end of the day, I think, his, I would say, attentiveness to Israel's perspective continued to drop as we approached his decision to go for this MOU, to the point where we're now hearing President Trump make statements which are frankly outrageous, saying that Israel can't deal with Hezbollah in a way that he finds appropriate, and even calling on the jihadist regime of Syria to send its army of jihadists to deal with Hezbollah instead of Israel. This is the insanity that's now coming out of the White House, unfortunately, and I don't think it represents the whole of the Trump administration, probably far from it. But I think this shows you it gives you an indication of the pressure levers that are acting on President Trump. It's the oil market, it's domestic political considerations, it's some of the Gulf states, particularly Qatar, and these have now basically, not to use a pun here, but these have trumped his willingness to listen to Israeli strategic considerations. So this MOU is separating the Hormuz issue from the nuclear issue, and it's opening a path for 60 days of negotiations. And basically, what seems to be the picture here that's emerging is that Iran would agree, quote unquote, to halt its nuclear program, possibly dilute its highly enriched uranium. We don't know if it would stay in Iran or not. And we don't have information about what would happen to Iranian enrichment sites. Let's remember that every major Iranian enrichment site has been hit. It was hit in June. Some of them were hit again in this war, in the second Iran war. And according to every known public assessment, they have not recovered. So what will this deal mean for Iran's ability to actually build centrifuges, to build enrichment capabilities? We don't yet know. We're hearing a lot of grand promises from Trump and from Vice President Vance, but Israel, I have to say, is very suspicious about the finer details of that nuclear clause of the agreement. Now, what's missing from this agreement? There's probably going to be no mention of Iran's ballistic missile program. This is the main reason that Israel launched a preemptive war together with the United States in February. From the Israeli perspective, it was because the Iranians were mass producing ballistic missiles, and they were on track to building 8,000 missiles by the end of 2027. That represents a conventional existential threat to the state of Israel, and there's absolutely no way that Israel could have tolerated living alongside a threat like that. And that is why Israel launched its preemptive attack together with America. Now, this MOU leading to negotiations is not mentioning the missiles at all. And it's very doubtful that if they reach an agreement, that agreement would mention the missiles. What does that mean for Israel? I'll talk about that in just a moment. The third area of concern for Israel is, what will this agreement mean for Iran's ability to arm, pay for, and train its terrorist proxies throughout the Middle East? Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in the Gaza Strip, the militias that it has in Iraq, the Houthis, the proxy network which Iran had built for years and had hoped would create a circle of fire around Israel. What will happen to Iran's ability to try and rebuild that proxy network? So these are all big unknowns. Israel is very unhappy with the general direction that this is going in. But I don't want to paint a picture of doom and gloom, because I think that would ignore the flip side of the coin. Now, what's the flip side of the coin? It's this. Whatever happens going forward, we have to note that right now, because of the two wars that have been fought against Iran, and because of the almost 3 years of conflict that Israel has waged against the terror proxies of Iran, against Hamas, against Hezbollah, against all of the jihadists that have encircled it and have been armed to the tooth by Iran, because of this persistent conflict and struggle for its security, which culminated in the second Iran war, every major aspect of the Iranian threat has been rolled back significantly. The balance of power has shifted dramatically in Israel's favor. The nuclear program has been set back by around 2.5, 3 years. And what that means, by the way, is not that it will take Iran 3 years to rebuild its nuclear program, but that Israel has a 3-year head start. So what this actually means is that Israel will have 3 years, 3 full years to decide when it intervenes to not ever allow Iran to rebuild its threshold capabilities. Right now, every single Iranian enrichment site at Fordow, at Natanz, at Isfahan, those sites have been bombed, wrecked, not rebuilt. Iran, according to the available research that's out there, is not involved in any uranium enrichment. And it doesn't have access to the 500 or so kilograms, 450 kilograms of highly enriched uranium that's buried in those three sites under rubble. So the Iranian nuclear program is not at the starting point that it was before these two wars, and that's part of the good news. Now, also the Iranian missile program has largely been demolished. Almost every single site that was used to create and produce and assemble Iranian ballistic missiles has been hit, and most of those sites have been destroyed. Most of Iran's launchers have been destroyed, about 60% destroyed, not neutralized, destroyed. There are other launches that Iran has been able to basically resurrect, but most of them have been taken out of commission permanently. And this is damage that cannot be fixed overnight. We hear lots of, I think, very false assumptions being thrown around international media, according to which, Iran is going to miraculously be able to revamp and repair a missile production industry that took it 30 years and hundreds of billions of dollars to put together. They're going to miraculously, within a year or two, have that thing back and up and running. That's not the case. It's simply impossible for a country as heavily damaged as Iran to do that. So the nuclear program, the missile program, and the proxy program, Hamas is a shadow of its former self. The Iranians don't have access to Hamas. They cannot physically rearm Hamas. It's surrounded in every direction by the IDF in the Gaza Strip. Two of its most senior leaders in Gaza were eliminated last month. Hamas didn't even respond with a mortar because that's how degraded its capabilities are at this stage. Yes, it still controls 2 million Gazans in the 30% of Gaza that it controls, and this is something that is going to have to be dealt with. There are many ways of that are being proposed of dealing with this. That's probably for another episode. But at the end of the day, Hamas is a shadow of its former self. It's a much, much, much smaller threat to the state of Israel than it was, obviously, on October 7th. Now, Hezbollah is also a shadow of its former self. It's got, even Prime Minister Netanyahu said this yesterday, 8% of its original firepower. That's, a small fraction. Its ability to invade northern Israel has been dismantled. The IDF has a security zone, just like in Gaza. It's got a security zone deep into southern Lebanon. And yesterday, Prime Minister Netanyahu made it clear that the IDF is going nowhere. It's not going to withdraw until such time as doing so would not represent a massive threat to the people of northern Israel, because Hezbollah would exploit that vacuum to reconstitute its invasion bases that were dotting the whole of the Lebanese-Israeli border. So Israel is not going to allow that to happen again. This is the new Israeli security doctrine. Security zones, proactive dismantling of enemy capabilities. And I think, this is where we are today, because Israel has been relentlessly pursuing this security doctrine in every arena: Iran, Gaza, Lebanon. The strategic situation of the state of Israel vis-a-vis the Iranian axis has improved dramatically. So that's why I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, that we should not be in a state of mind of doom and gloom and everything is lost, because the past almost 3 years of conflict have resulted in massive gains for the state of Israel and a severe weakening of the Iranian axis, its nuclear program, its missile program, and its proxy program. The three pillars of the Iranian plan to destroy the state of Israel have all been smashed and severely, severely degraded. Now, this isn't the ideal outcome. The Iranian regime has survived, and we have this disturbing questions about what may come forward. And here I think I'm going to be posing basically a series of criteria and tests. This is what I want to introduce here to this conversation. So rather than claiming that I know what's going to happen in the future, because I don't, and I don't think anybody does, I have my hopes, and I have a number of assumptions and expectations as an Israeli citizen here living in this country after October 7th, and I'm going to present those to you right now. And I'm going to also look for some signs that this may come to fruition, this new Israeli approach. But we have to be modest, and we have to say we don't know what's going to happen. We have to outline the various potential scenarios. So the deal is not looking good because it would allow Iran to start receiving large funds, and it would obviously use those funds to try and rebuild its missile program, its terrorist proxies, even if we assume that it freezes its nuclear program for a period of time. But as I've said, that doesn't mean that Iran can tomorrow go back to what it was, or that it will have access to its proxies. Now, here is where the big test comes for Israel. Will Israel, whoever is leading it, whoever is going to be leading this country, will they stay true to the new security doctrine? The new security doctrine states very clearly that jihadist adversaries, whether they're in Tehran or in Gaza or in Lebanon, cannot be allowed to build capabilities, because we know that they're going to use and activate those capabilities when they deem it tactically optimal for them to do so. Will they be allowed to rebuild or not? That is the big strategic test that's going to be facing any Israeli leadership. Now, here's the good news, okay? First of all, if you look at the comments that came out of Defense Minister Katz, Prime Minister Netanyahu, and the defense establishment, the military officials, they're all saying the same thing. They are saying it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. We're not going to sit on our hands again and allow these jihadists to rebuild. Now, let me just give you a few examples of this. Prime Minister Netanyahu said yesterday, this is Trump's deal, it's not ours. He's being diplomatic, but that is a very dramatic statement, because what he's saying here is that Israel is not going to be bound by this agreement, and if it identifies threats to its security that are not covered by this agreement, it's going to take action. So not only is the IDF not withdrawing from southern Lebanon, which is one of the things that the Iranians and Hezbollah try to get President Trump to force Israel to do, but also Israel is saying it's going to continue to take action in Lebanon. That's a dramatic statement, because one of the biggest concerns regarding this MOU is that the Iranians have somehow been able to reestablish a connection between themselves as the mothership of the jihadist axis and their chief proxy, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and that they're going to create some sort of diplomatic immunity and a pressure lever that runs from Tehran through Washington, through this MOU and future deal, and onto Jerusalem, that's supposed to bound Israel's hands together and prevent it from acting against Hezbollah, and prevent it from basically securing the fundamental security of northern Israel. That is their hope, and that's what they've been basically signaling through their state media and propaganda statements. Yesterday, Prime Minister Netanyahu said it's not going to happen. He's going to have to prove it. Prime Minister Netanyahu is going to have to prove it through action. And it's not a simple challenge. It's not easy to turn around to the president who has come very far with Israel. We have to acknowledge that. There's a lot of Israelis now feeling, and supporters of Israel who feel disappointment and bitterness, and rightly so, because some of President Trump's statements have been really recently just abhorrent. But we cannot forget that this administration has enabled Israel to make massive gains in every arena against Hamas, against Hezbollah, against the Iranian regime. And now Prime Minister Netanyahu is going to be facing a huge test, turning around to this president and potentially any future ones and saying, no, we're not going to have our hands bound. If we recognize major threats, we're going to take action, come what may. Now, my expectation, and I think I speak for most Israelis here, is that this is what we expect our government to do. we are not supposed to be expected to take existential risks, security risks, to place the lives of our civilians at risk. Because if we don't, if we place those interests, our core security interests, in second place and third priority, and then we'll have a great relationship with Washington, and the world will be happy with us. If we go back to that kind of thinking, that would be a complete failure of the government's own basic responsibility for its civilians. And so the message coming out of the leadership here today and yesterday is that no, nothing is going to force Israel to place its security in second place. Not an MOU, not an agreement, not pressure from Washington, nothing. This position is a bold position. I think it's the only correct position. Any country in our place would take this position. And people have to understand that any government that would stray from this position wouldn't survive here for a day, because it would basically be telling its civilians, your lives are second place. What kind of government could be expected to say that to its own civilians? Imagine any country that you live in hearing a government say, I'm going to put your lives and your security and your homes in second place because we don't want to aggravate our allies. It's crazy. And so it's not going to happen. And it's crazy not only because it's a betrayal, if something like that ever happened, but also because it's a flawed calculation. Forget the emotions of this for a second and look at this logically. From Israel's calculus, any price that Israel would be asked to pay for pursuing its security interests, even the worst price you can imagine, arms embargoes and United Nations Security Council resolutions, let's take it to the most extreme. Those prices would still be far lower than the idea of allowing monstrous jihadist capabilities to return to our border and putting our population again at risks of massacres. These are existential threats. What is a bigger price to pay than an existential threat, than another October 7th, than a missile onslaught, than a nuclear program? And so it's not a real dilemma. It really isn't from an Israeli perspective. And so this is what the leadership yesterday here was saying. And I think that if we take them at their word, and I very much hope that's what's going to happen, we can flesh out how this is going to play out. In, first of all, Lebanon, because Lebanon is the arena that Iran is really trying to throw its weight around in and to prove that it is able to restrain Israel. So, first of all, the IDF not withdrawing from the security zone in southern Lebanon, we've already said that. Now, there are two more tests of this doctrine in Lebanon. The second test is what happens when Hezbollah attacks the IDF. Prime Minister Netanyahu was explicit, so was Defense Minister Katz yesterday. They were saying any attacks on the IDF will result in immediate counterattacks. We saw that happen today. Today, there were anti-tank missile incidents. There were rocket incidents. The IDF responded, eliminated terror operatives, eliminated the launchers. Okay, that's obvious. What happens when Israel detects Hezbollah building missiles in Dakhia in Beirut, for example, beyond the security zone? That's going to be the test. That is going to be the test, because Hezbollah will obviously try to take advantage of the idea that it has a zone of immunity, that Iran gave it to it as a gift. Dakhia is off limits to Israel because the whole of the Iranian-American memorandum of understanding depends now on what Israel is going to do in Dakhia. Ladies and gentlemen, if Israel accepts that equation, it's a huge, huge blow to its security. I don't think that Israel is going to accept that equation, come what may. So definitely watch Beirut very closely. Now, I should also say, and it's important to note that the Lebanese government has taken bold steps to try and basically reach a diplomatic solution with Israel, and has publicly identified Iran and Hezbollah as the problem in Lebanon, as the warmongers, as the forces of evil. They have said it. And it's good that they say that, but words are not enough. Certainly not for the residents of northern Israel who have had to deal with these threats for so many years. And so until the Lebanese government proves that it's willing and able to fight Hezbollah and win, don't expect an Israeli withdrawal. They have to prove with action what they're saying, and until they do, I don't think it's realistic at all to expect the IDF to withdraw. Now, there's a side debate that's going on here in Israel amongst policymakers. Should we give Lebanon a chance? Should we try and encourage it to take control of territory? There's all these ideas of pilot schemes. And this is a separate topic. I think, it's something that I could dedicate another video to. But at the end of the day, the way things are looking right now, the Lebanese army is neither willing nor able to properly take on Hezbollah. We saw that it pretended to do this throughout the past 2 years. And when Hezbollah dragged the region back into war in March, when the Iranians gave it an order to get involved, something like 50% of the rockets that they fired at northern Israel came from an area south of the Litani River. If you look on a map, you will see that southern Lebanon is divided by the Litani River. And this is an area where the Lebanese army said that it cleared all the villages and all of the various cities and towns. They cleared it of Hezbollah's weapons. This was their claim. And yet 50% of all of the rockets and attacks that Israel faced since the 2nd of March, when Hezbollah got involved in this war, came from exactly the area where Lebanon claimed it cleared cleared it of weapons. So how much can we trust Lebanon's word? Not at all, unfortunately, not at this time. So let me say something positive as well, because there's also a debate going on. We should mark out what we would expect to see to give southern Lebanon to the control of the Lebanese army. What would we need to see in order to do that? Let's not just speak in negative terms. And I think that that's a fair comment. We should say that. So I would say, if I see the Lebanese army in Beirut, in the capital, take on Hezbollah and win, if I see them take control of their own capital, and if I see Hezbollah resisting and the Lebanese army going in and fighting them and winning, then I will turn around to our Lebanese partners in negotiations and say, this is very encouraging. If you can keep doing that, we have something to talk about in terms of establishing you, the Lebanese army, as the sovereign in southern Lebanon. Let's see that happen. Take control of your own capital, for God's sake. But they don't, because they're scared of a civil war, and they're scared that they're going to lose a civil war. And that's the real state of affairs in Lebanon. And until that changes, nobody should expect the IDF to withdraw. So I think that Lebanon is going to be a very, very important test. Now, look, this deal has very little to do with the Gaza Strip. I'm sure that Iran is going to try and look for ways to reestablish its proxy support system for Hamas. It's really going to struggle to do that. And also, Hamas, in the meantime, has found new benefactors, Qatar and Turkey, and Israel is going to have to work hard to make sure that they also don't get their claws into the Gaza Strip. That would be a huge mistake. But really, at the end of the day, I think that Gaza right now has sunk to the lowest priority because of the other two arenas that have been so demanding of Israel's resources and attention, and that is, of course, Iran and Hezbollah. And a final note on the situation in Judea and Samaria in the West Bank. This is an arena that's very easy to forget, but let me tell you, I've been talking to military officials about this arena, and there has been a concerted effort by Iran and Hamas to try and basically set this arena, Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, to set it ablaze, because they know that this is Israel's soft underbelly. If you look on a map, this is the closest to Israel's heartland and major cities, to greater Tel Aviv. And they have tried relentlessly to smuggle arms, both Iran and Hamas, from Jordan into this area. They have tried to create terror cells and amalgamate them into unified terror cells. Most of these efforts have failed. And one of the reasons that they failed is because Israel's new security doctrine, the same doctrine that I talked about being applied in southern Lebanon and Gaza, which is seizing territory from the jihadists and not leaving, we're seeing this applied in Samaria, in the northern West Bank, Jenin, a terrorist hornet's nest for years, since the Second Intifada. I can tell you that the IDF is planning on building a base there, and it has been there since January 2025, since it launched a massive operation called Iron Wall. Since that operation, and it seized the territory and it hasn't left, we've seen a 70% drop in terrorism. It's extremely dramatic, terrorist incidents. So you're seeing that the new security doctrine brings results, brings security, the seizing of territory, and then not withdrawing, but establishing these security zones all around Israel is one of the critical aspects of this doctrine, and I think we can expect it to be applied for a long time to come. So look, I think I'll leave it here. I hope that this gave you a detailed enough picture, and I really hope that I was able to also point out what we should look out for and to try and provide a balanced picture. Yes, many troubling aspects of this MOU, but let's not forget that we are entering this period from a position of strength, and it's a position of strength that, if we're honest, very few people anticipated that we would be in on the darkest of days in Israel's history, October 7th. I don't think many people expected us to be in a situation where most of these threats, all the threats that I've detailed, would be so badly degraded. I think we have to be patient. We have to view this as a process. This is how wars are fought today. There are long endurance struggles and tests. There are no quick fixes here. So thank you very much for your attention. I always appreciate your comments. I get them. They mean the world to me. It's late here in Israel, so I'm going to cap it here, and I look forward to our next discussion.